Implicit in the idea of democracy, though, there are a few assumptions. The biggest one is that the people are actually capable of governing themselves. This means that people have to be informed about politics and policy, and we have to be able to determine which policy is best for us between a set of choices. We also have to be able to think beyond our narrow self-interest and think about the greater good for the greatest number. Maybe the policy that benefits you the most isn't the best policy for everyone, or the best policy for the long-term good of the nation. Take a minute to think about the people you know and how well they meet these requirements. Do they care enough about politics to be informed? Are they capable of processing complex political information? Are they capable of looking beyond their own self-interest? And are they capable of looking to a long-term good rather than voting for just whatever makes them feel good in any particular moment? Think about your friends for a minute. Think about the people you know. Think about the people you run into in the mall. Think about the people you meet on a daily basis. If your friends are anything like mine, clearly you can see there are challenges to having a successful democracy. So, before we go any further, democracy can be used in so many different contexts that I do want to make some clarifications before we use it as a standard of evaluation and try to answer the question of how democratic is the United States. Again, small d democratic. There are two types of democracy we're going to talk about. The first is what's known as direct democracy. To the ancient Greeks, democracy meant rule by the people, exercised directly in open assemblies. People would get together in the agora, debate the great issues of the day, and then vote on what is best for the nation. In modern society, we have something like this in roughly half of the states with ballot initiatives and referenda, and where people vote directly on laws. Interestingly, while we typically enjoy democracy and people want more of it, most initiatives fail, so effectively we enjoy voting against things rather than voting for things. There's a lot of reasons for this, primarily because people enjoy the status quo. At the end of the day, it's about people actively and directly ruling themselves. So think about this for a minute. What are some strengths to this approach? What are some weaknesses to this approach? Take a minute to think this through and why this would be a good thing or a bad thing. Again, we go back to some of the issues we talked about earlier. Do you trust other people to make decisions for you and the rest of the country? Are people informed enough to do these things? Do people care enough to make these things? Similarly, direct democracy voting on issues like this is very inefficient. How would you like it if every time we had to do something in Congress, you had to show up and vote? People don't like to vote once or twice a year as it is, especially here in Virginia where it seems like it's 3, 4, 5 times a year. But you make that in terms of, having to show up for ballot initiatives every time your country wants a policy, your state wants a policy, your city wants a policy, etc. It's going to be exhausting, fatiguing, etc. The other idea is, how can you be informed about all these issues? People have full-time jobs, families, things they want to do. Do they have time to become informed about every issue, or is it better just to pay somebody to do it for you? On the other hand, there's some strengths, obviously, right? The idea that you can pass policy, you can vote on it, you don't have to worry about members of Congress losing sight of things, voting for lobbyists, voting for their narrow constituency, things like that. It's the best way to get your voice heard, to be represented, is the chance to actually vote, and presumably it keeps policy and politics closest to the people. So there's strengths and weaknesses to this approach for sure. The second type of democracy is what we practice most frequently here in America, representative democracy. It's ruled by the people, but exercised indirectly through representatives selected by the people. Basically, like we talked about earlier, we realize we don't have time, energy, or the desire to practice democracy correctly in the direct democracy way, so we hire people to do it for us. The same way you hire a plumber to fix your toilets, same way you hire a roofer to replace your roof on your house, electricians, etc., etc. We hire full-time representatives who are charged with learning about all these issues that we don't have time to learn about, and then hire them to exercise their judgment in place of our own. This is why you see sex scandals and things like that becoming such big issues, because we're asking politicians to use their best judgment to represent us, and when they, commit what we consider possibly moral issues, moral sins, when they do things we wouldn't do, then we question their judgment. So there's potential here for slippage, potential here for electing bad actors and things like that. Think about the strengths and weaknesses from the last slide and flip those, and that becomes the arguments for and against representative democracy.